Okay, good day, everyone. Welcome to Open Heroines' first virtual event. My name is Maria Cruz, and we are here today with Open Heroines. Open Heroines is a network of women working in open web in projects that involve civic tech, open gov, and open data. And in this event today, we are getting a number of Open Heroines who are going to have a conversation about projects that focus on developing capacity for and by women. And this event is aligned with International Women's Day global campaign, Balance for Better. And with that, I'm going to present my co-presenters today are Nani, Nani, who is a program assistant for Southeast Asian Press Alliance, and Shi Blanc, who is a developer for theportal.org. Myself, I'm Maria Cruz. I'm a communications and outreach manager at the Wikimedia Foundation. And with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Shi.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you so much for joining us. Really excited about this first virtual event for Open Heroines. I've got 3 really wonderful guests for you to hear about today. Without further ado, I will introduce Ishik Matter, and she will talk to you about net blocks.
Hi. Hi, Ishik.
Hi. Hi. I hope everybody can hear me well. So I'm going to introduce to Sarah Kimmich, and she'll be sharing more about online brain intensive.
Okay, great. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys so that you can see the specific course that we developed. All right. So what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today is the online brain intensive. If you can see the screen now, this is our website. It is both a course where we teach basic computational neuroscience concepts, and then moving on from that, we really moved into data science and machine learning. It was a 4-week course that we have created, and we had contributors for this content from a lot of the major academic silos. We had Stanford, Dartmouth, Cambridge University. A bunch of people were really interested in helping us create a new type of course. I'm sure a lot of you have taken an online course before, and even if it's a computational course or a coding course, I always get really bothered by how theoretical things are. And what I really wanted to do was give people an opportunity to work on real brain data sets and take what they were learning and apply it in real time. And I thought that that would be a really interesting way for people to learn the hard lessons. A lot of times there's little challenging things to working with these data sets that you're not going to figure out until you're really working with them in real time. But what was really neat about this is over a single month of training these individuals and getting them access to brain data sets, they were able to come up with a couple of new entire platforms. So instead of just coming out with a certification, we came out of the 2017 online brain intensive with a bunch of usable platforms. So we have automated neuroimaging pipelines. There was a paper for auditory stimuli and depression. A bunch of really interesting applied computational neuroscience came out of it. Now, I'm really glad to be on this panel. And I'm excited, and this has become a bit of a feminist agenda for me. But if you had asked me when I started this course, if I was doing it to help elevate women, it absolutely was not. When I started this course, my whole reasoning was that I had just gone through a hiring at my lab, and one of the most highly qualified individuals that we had there had been turned down on the reasoning that someone just, quote unquote, could not see them working there. And when I left that room, it wasn't that I was experiencing any, sensations of injustice, etc. What I was really feeling in that moment was the very particular rage that an engineer gets when they are working on a system that is incredibly inefficient and was not optimized. So in making this course, it allowed us to provide content entirely free for anyone to participate in. And we had about 750 individuals participate in the first year. Anyone that submitted a successful open source project outline, we were able to provide them with AWS cloud computing credits. So if they could access the data and they had a outline set up, they could create real work. On the back side of this, it looks like a very conventional course, but I was adamant that anyone who participated in this course would do so anonymously and would be able to have one-on-one engagement with the experts in the field without any bias coming into that interaction. I assumed that we would get the typical demographics of about 20 to 25% female and 70 to 80% male engagement, but our demographics turned out to be quite a bit different to that. We had about 60% of our participants were female. Of course, I was the only person that had that information until we unblinded it after the course. And about 80, I believe it was 85% of the final source projects, these are individuals that completed the entire course and actually had a substantial product for this, were female. And at first, I thought that it was just because I had created a platform where people could engage anonymously. Maybe there was less bias on the side of the instructors, or maybe there was less fear for the female participants to engage and ask real questions. But this became a bit of a feminist agenda for me when I figured out that the reason why we had really highly productive females in this course was because almost a third of our participants in the first year were postgraduate female scientists. So we're talking about early to mid-career scientists who have already been highly academically trained. And when I found that out, I sent out a query to find out why they were participating in this. And I found that the majority of them cited a lack of material resources in their workplace. So as a postdoc, you have to be able to demonstrate that you're able to analyze novel data sets. And these female scientists were stating that they just didn't have that available to them. And that really shocked me. So moving forward with this, I've found that making sure that the platforms that we have are equal access, in the sense that people don't have to engage with any of the biases and the microtransactions, even when they're just asking a technical question about a code. I think that's important, but the reason this open web initiative has really changed the way that we can do education is that now these individuals don't have to wait for there to be a gatekeeper. You don't have to wait for permission to get access to one of these massive brain data sets. Every single one of these projects was assisted in some way by a university or by Institute of Health in the US. And if we wanted to work on automating neural pipelines, we were able to work with Stanford to get their reproducibility center to work with us to do that. When we wanted to work on depression, we reached out to National Institutes of Health, and they provided an open source data set or made a data set open to us to use. So I'm really excited to be on this panel, and I'm really interested to hear. There's so many interesting projects going on. But I loved producing this course because it showed me just how powerful the open web is. Honestly, it was just a couple of emails and we had this thing up and rolling, and it's snowballed from here. In this coming year, we're going to start working specifically with National Institutes of Health and the Aging Institute to have funding for anyone to participate in this course, regardless of whether they are able to successfully put through one of these coding outlines. We will be providing cloud computing resources to them so that they can engage in a real way and compete with some of these major computational resources. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. We're gonna try again with Ishik. Are you ready to present? We can see your screen. I think you need to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, yeah. Hi, yeah, I'm Ishik. I'm working with the Networks project. We are a civil society group working on monitoring internet shutdowns around the world, and also doing digital security trainings all around the world with different groups from around the world. So our main job is like keep communities safe, and mostly during the elections, because people need more than too much information around the elections, and almost in the times of emergency, so they need the real-time internet measurements. So we try to provide them this kind of measurements. Open data is like a very important principle for us, because open data means freedom of expression, and it means democracy. So we are trying to build
just close the full screen.
Yeah, sure.
Then you need to just use that window so people aren't seeing the slides.
Can people see the slides? Hello?
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Yeah, okay, okay. So, yeah. We try to build an education system around open data. So let me show you an example of this is our term, like raw data. We are collecting evidence during internet shutdowns all around the world. Like this is like a very big data. And we try to create like a reasonable and actionable data from this, like turn to raw data, this one. This is like data from Mali elections we collected. So, yeah. And this is our one of the probes. We started with probes and give them away around the world. So people put them this kind of little Raspberry Pi onto their computers, so they can help us to collect evidence through their networks. Yeah. Yeah, our most important thing for us is like the secure the digital rights for users. We don't want to put them any risk, the individuals, because most of them live in the oppressed countries. And our most important job is, like, I think, access to knowledge online, to make sure everyone is have the right to access the knowledge of online knowledge. Yeah. So this is one of our. We support Wikipedia and Wikimedia in Turkey. We have struggles with Wikipedia, like, for almost more than 1 year right now. So we try to make some advocacy on that. Yeah. And we also work on the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, try to create some protocol standardization, and adding human rights aspect to it is, I think, is very important. Yeah. I think that's it for now.
Thank you so much, Ishik. That was very enlightening.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up is Catarina Cosme.
Hi, I'll turn my screen sharing on in a second. Hello, everyone. Just a minute. Okay, do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. So unlike Ishik and Sarah, this story is more local, although it starts global. So although I work for the United Nations Development Program in Belgrade on topics of digital transformation and open data, I actually also co-organize the local chapter of Our Ladies. Our Ladies is a global initiative that exists in 45 countries, and it has, using the Meetup platform, it has spread to 145 cities around the world. And it has around, I think specifically, it has 42,220 members. And it organizes different types of events. I mentioned some on the slide, but what it actually allows us to do in Belgrade, and we've been doing this since November 2017, is actually gather women who work with the R programming language or want to work with R to help them with mentorship, with workshops, with with any type of personal or professional projects that they have, and also provide a safe space for them to discuss any challenges they might be facing. When it comes to Our Ladies Belgrade, one of the reasons why I got into this story is I was a program coordinator for 7 different hubs across Serbia. And whenever you organized a meetup or a workshop or a course, you would always have at most 30% women. So we wanted to do that was actually women for women and creating a more supportive and inclusive atmosphere. So far, we've organized more than 13 events, but we've also done numerous informal mentorships, or we would organize weekly meetings surrounding a particular open material or course, where we would work together and help our members learn new code or a different way of analysis or visualization. So we have a little less than 300 members. It doesn't mean that everyone comes every time to our events, but we do allow children, dogs, and men, and everyone else who feels that they want to learn R in a different type of environment. And basically, I did mention what we're about. So far, I would say one of our interesting projects was, because we work a lot with open data, we've used open data, we've used an open data set from the city of Belgrade that was about traffic accidents all over the city. It was only for 2015, but we made an interactive application which allowed our members to analyze the data, play with it, identify specific trends. So it also involved a lot of cleaning because open data is still a really young initiative in Serbia. So it's not, you open a data set and some things are in Cyrillic, some are in English, some are in Serbian in the Latin alphabet. So it really playing with open data is one of our goals. It's hard at times, as I mentioned, because it's still a young initiative in Serbia, but we're getting there. And we've also organized a few events in other cities trying to spread the word out, but there's still not that much interest in terms of R. So in Serbia, Python is more popular, or psychologists and other professions use SPSS. So we're fighting for our solidarity, but also female solidarity. And the obstacles or frustrations that we faced so far one is why won't more women actually present their projects and talk about the things that they're doing? Open data helps partially with this because it allows sometimes women working professionally on specific code can't share it outside of their work, but if they work on open data projects, they can actually share more of their experiences. But it's not just a problem of what information can be shared, it's also how confident these women feel about presenting their stuff. There's the imposter syndrome. It takes convincing someone that they actually have something valuable to share. And it's a global issue, but also a cultural issue. In some societies, it's better than in others. Then we also have occasional mansplainers, which, since we are open to everyone, we have amazing collaborative men at our events as well. But sometimes we have situations where you need to handle things in a very direct fashion and say, well, these are our rules. This is an inclusive space. This is a space to ask questions, not make judgments. So that's one thing that we sometimes need to deal with. And as I mentioned, the open data that we have to work with that's relevant for Serbia is not that abundant as we would like it to be. So it takes a little bit more creativity. We need to combine different data sets from different institutions that are available, or actually use data sets that international organizations open up, because sometimes they're just better to work with than what we have. But some progress has been made in terms of, for example, air quality data that's opening up now in Serbia. There's real-time unverified data that can be downloaded. So, yay, progress. But yeah, that's about it. I'm excited to discuss questions regarding the open web and building capacities for women with the wonderful ladies joining us today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Katarina. And with this, we are going to move on to the open conversation part of our event. We have some questions prepared, but if you're watching this on YouTube, please also share your questions. You can share via Twitter using the hashtag OpenHeroines or Balance4Better. And on YouTube, there's an app where you can post the questions on the side. And also, if you're in this Hangout and you have questions, please also feel free to speak up. And so with that, our first question is, what does the open web mean to you?
I think that's open to the floor, so anyone can.
Yeah, anyone can contribute here.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah,
first?
go ahead.
Yeah, I think open web has like two aspects. One is the technical aspect, like, you know, open source code, open internet standards. But the other aspect is the democracy aspect, like including freedom of speech, access to information, and digital rights. And I think there is only one principle that connects those two aspects, which is open web belongs to its users, right? Not to gatekeepers or governments or any other companies. Like, and open web should be like a healthy environment where people do research, share information, kids like teach themselves coding. Like opposite of this is like I think closed web, where governments and companies do surveillance, technology is taken over by proprietary software. I don't think we want that kind of web, right? So we don't want a web controlled by privileged stakeholders. I think open web means it's belong to all its users, not any other stakeholder. Yeah.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. I think what I really enjoyed and really opened my eyes when I developed this course was the kind of energy that was behind it. I really thought that I would have to be really pushing out this content, making sure that people were engaged, and working hard to make sure that the data sets that were available were not corrupted in any way. And the data sets that weren't available, I thought I was really going to have to fight to get those. But at the end of the day, I think I always, I like to open the talks that I give sometimes when I'm talking about this kind of work with the idea that some people just like to see the world stop burning, you know? Some people really like the idea of just getting their hands dirty and doing whatever they can to solve a good and meaningful problem. And the open web has really, really changed the way that we can make quick progress. You don't have to wait for funding or access in the way that you would have had to do 10 years ago. I do think there is one kind of problem that we're still having to work through on all of these open initiatives, and that is gaining equal access to computation. It's still something, cloud computing has still really got just a couple of stakeholders, and although you can get a limited number of credits, it's not really as available as it should be in a democratic way. So I think we're going to see that moving forward. But the open web really is ideal democracy facilitated by the internet.
Definitely, I wouldn't add too much to what Ishik and Sarah said, but I would say that for me, what defines open web is it's a public good. It should be there for everyone, and it shouldn't exclude or have gatekeepers, as Ishik said. And what's wonderful is that it's a perfect example where globalization works to our advantage in terms of actually promoting interdisciplinarity and inclusion from all sides of the world. So that's it.
I think that's really fascinating to hear three completely different women from different places on the planet saying exactly the same things. So that's marvelous. Moving swiftly to a very connective question. How did you start working in open web projects? So your what is that? Origin story, I suppose. Anyone? Looks like it's up to you. Oh, Sarah, yeah.
I'm happy to talk about this. Yeah, so I mean, I came from an academic background where I generally had access or was creating the data sets that I needed to use. So it didn't originally come to mind in the work that I was doing to be utilizing these open data sets. Where I came across it was I was working in Washington, D.C., and I was actually helping to run a meetup for data visualization. for whatever reason, there seemed to be a dearth of data sets at the time because we were trying to work directly with industry partners or academic partners and really pair with them to get data sets. So I looked at that and I turned it on its head and I said, there's an entire internet full of really interesting and meaningful problems, and there are people that really want to see solutions. So instead of going out and asking people to give us access to data sets, what we did instead was put up major ideas. So the first thing that we did was say, look, we want to work on immigration issues broadly. And we actually had the Peace Institute in Washington, D.C. contact us and say, oh, we just made this data set available. Can you work with us? And that was my first setting onto open science resource, well, open web resources. But I think we all just have a pretty positive relationship with GitHub and Stack Overflow. And I think we all understand in this world where everything moves so fast, the open web is making the rate of progress exponential because we can work with each other so quickly and so effectively, and because we've so intentionally taken these other barriers down.
Fantastic. That's really inspiring to hear how you just sort of got on the bandwagon and go, hey, I can do this. And then suddenly people, went to you and say, hey, can you take a look at this now? So that's really awesome. Katarina, do you want to share your origin story?
Ooh, I wish I would feel as a superhero. I was actually doing my BA at the time, and I was doing an internship at an institute studying forced migrations. So a common thread over here. But what we were invited by an NGO to work on mapping out issues with asylum policies in Latin American countries. And the main, let's say, obstacle was the lack of data, the lack of human stories that would provide both quantitative and qualitative data about the issues, because you only had reports from different NGOs and lawyers. So that is actually the time where I started thinking about open data and crowdsourcing data from users and developing whole new data sets, because you reach a challenge where all of the established stakeholders don't provide you what you need in terms of data. So that's what got me hooked and why I'm still here.
That's wonderful. It's basically like you're adding context to all those numbers to mean something, isn't it? As opposed to just these figures on a dashboard. You're telling people, these numbers are actually real people facing real things. So that's wonderful. Ishik, do you have something to share about your first memory of how you came about to be?
Yeah, okay. I think my story begins back in 2013 during Gezi protests in Istanbul. At the same time with the Gezi protests, Edward Snowden revealed NSA documents about government surveillance. And during Gezi, I met that digital security trainer from Tunisia. I don't know how that happened. I don't remember, and had my first crypto party, which means a security training as well that day. And after that crypto party was like an awakening call. Yeah. I mean, I got enlightened for that. So, and that makes me immediately decide to work on digital rights. And so I became a member of Alternative Informatics Association of Turkey. It's an NGO focusing on digital rights, freedom of speech, surveillance, censorship, and mostly the most focus was on free software and open source projects. And I must say that I became the president that NGO after joining 2 years, and became and being the president for 4 years. I just left my duties because I was beginning to be so busy. So I also wanted to support open source encryption tools and open data. So I enrolled a master's degree program in software engineering. I just completed it like last year. During my master's, I think it was in 2015, I made with Turkey Blocks project, which was then doing the monitoring internet shutdowns in Turkey. So I started to work with them, and because in 2015 and 16 in Turkey, the situation was really bad. After every explosion, after every political incident, internet shutdowns was happening all the time. People started trying to reach their families, trying to connect their loved ones, but it was impossible. So we decided to do this project to help people and give them a voice. And since then, I'm working on this Turkey Blocks /NetBlocks project, collecting open data and try to help people. And I think this is my story.
Cool, that's amazing. So I'm gonna ask another question. What challenges did you face when you first started working in open web projects? This is a question to the floor. Any speakers?
Okay. Oh, Sarah did it at the same time. You sure?
Go for it.
Yeah. Well, I came back to Serbia after 7 years as a fresh graduate student, and I had a lot of enthusiasm I had got a fellowship to work on open data in Serbia, which was really hard since there was no open data. I mean, there was very little to do. So that was one of the biggest challenges, because I really wanted to do something that was global in terms of the topic, but local in terms of its impact. And I would say that it really took 2 to 3 years to actually have a feeling that you're doing something of value, that you're not just like a crazy quasi-messiah going around talking about something that doesn't exist. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the problems that you're working on, but I do think one of the sort of under-discussed problems about the open web is that a lot of the things that we're working on are usually over raw data sets. Essentially, you're not getting something that someone has worked to curate to make easy to process, or you're dealing with things that are live inputs in borderline real time. So I think there's this really interesting intersection of some of the hardest computational problems that we have come in the open science world, because we're dealing with such really, really challenging data sets. And fortunately, I think a lot of the smartest people are really biting into those problems and working on them. But I think that's something that, especially from jumping over from academia, I realized that, real world problems have really, really challenging solutions, computationally speaking. And it also, I just think that when we're working on these really big problems and we're trying to break them down into smaller issues that we can tangibly go after, I think we really just need to push on the computation. I know I keep saying it, but I really wish we had more cloud computing in the open web. We don't have enough yet. I do have a question to the group.
Okay.
One thing that I'm wondering about is when you are pitching these new initiatives to people who are not necessarily in or really fluent in open science, what are some of the roadblocks or some of the ways that you find that it's best to communicate open science to people who are maybe naive to open science, or even really naive to a lot of the way that the web works. I'm thinking, for example, when you're trying to like pitch to an NGO or for grant writing.
Actually, I can answer your question. It's when it comes to communication, it is a challenge to use layman terms on very complicated subjects. But I think it's a good kind of challenge because it, for example, I would love to share my experience when I introduce, let's say, for example, this workshop that I ran last year. It's about digital marketing, data science in marketing. So how we can apply data science topics in the marketing field, especially the traditional marketing, to actually sell that pitch to a clientele who have no clue about data science. It's super, super hard, especially when you talk about something that is related to technology, to somebody who might have difficulties when it comes to, well, I would say, technology challenge. So yes, somebody told me that if you can understand a topic or a knowledge or a skill, that means you can communicate that to anybody else. If you can't communicate that, that means you don't understand how it works. So yeah. Anybody else want to share?
Well, this is just the practical approach that I have every time that I'm pitching anything, but especially when it comes to open data, is I start up with numbers, and then I get to the micro level, personal stories and experiences. And when you connect these two, I think I read something about it, it also sticks more. Personal stories we remember longer. So when you connect these, when you disguise these arguments with numbers and personal stories, they kind of stick in the minds of those you're trying to weave in to open science or open web or open data initiatives. So that's it.
I'll bite. I usually try to find common grounds between like somebody who doesn't know anything about tech or open science or open data. And I also try to do a lot of research on who they are and what they are passionate about. Then I sort of try and, I don't know, stalk them in a good way, and then find a good example where I can give analogies to what I'm trying to say to them and what I think they might understand. So things like large numbers, people tend to find it hard to, you say 1 million and they're like, I don't know, 1 million is like a lot. And yes, I don't know what 1 million means. And you go, okay, 1,000 tons. And again, they're like, I don't know what that means. So I say things like 1,000 tons, it's possibly like 10 elephants. And then they go, oh, yeah, okay, 10 elephants. I can see that. And then it gets a little bit more smaller and more relatable. I think that sort of analogy that normal people can understand seems to be one of the things that work, at least in my experience. Okay, that's it for me.
I just want to mention that she said normal people versus versus us, the
you know what I mean?
bizarre creatures of the open web.
Yeah, the ones that are okay with numbers. And they're like, numbers.
Yeah, that's really funny. I was thinking of something that I know works in Wikimedia is, and this came up actually in conversation in presentation I think Ishik mentioned some of this, but I see that a lot of the values that are promoted in open web are actually help to reframe ideas that we have been advocating for centuries, which is democracy and participation. And so, for example, this is not asking for money, but it's asking for archives to be uploaded to Wikimedia platforms so that people can access them on Wikipedia and so on. One of the stories that I heard is in talking with government entities, is telling them that they are underutilizing resources of the state if they are not using all the means to promote this content that actually belongs to the people. So when there is, I'm thinking of historical archives and cultural heritage that belongs to the people of that nation. That's, I think, thinking of the open web and the values it promotes, it's actually part of the narrative for human rights and freedom of expression and democracy. So being able to connect this technology with values that anyone should be advocating for is also very important, I think. So I think with that, I'm going to ask the next question. I might skip this one because I want to get to other questions as well. So did you or do you have a mentor? Is there someone that you feel like you have learned a lot from, or anyone that made you feel empowered to step into this organizing role?
Sure, I'll take that on. I think, you know, I've been lucky to have a lot of people that have acted as mentors in one way or another along my career. But there is one person that has always stood out to me, and it was someone that I worked for as an undergraduate. Their name was Dr. Lisa Eiler. And at the time, it didn't stand out to me, but she was really focused on reducing implicit bias in the workspace that she was creating. So she went out of her way to get training, and she got training for everyone that worked with her, including me. And I think I was young and naive and thought that that was a bit more standardized. And then moving on to other workplaces, I found people let their implicit biases get in the way all the time, and it's so inefficient. So I always keep that in mind, the idea of when I think this idea of, are you creating a system that doesn't allow you to get in the way of yourself, is a really, really good idea. And making that available to anyone, I think, is the way that we got to go.
Okay. Well, I didn't have a mentor, but historical women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields like Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper, Hedy Lamarr, and Katherine Johnson was my inspiration while stepping into this role, I think. According to a study at the University of Toronto, I think I read it like 3 years ago or something, women more than men need role models who are the same gender as they are. Women like Ada Lovelace or Katherine Johnson demonstrate that it is possible to overcome traditional gender barriers, indicating to other women that high levels of success, I think, are indeed possible for them as well.
So I sometimes really wish that I have a specific long-term mentor that follows me and is sassy with me and puts me back when I fall apart. But what I have actually noticed is whether it's work or outside of work or sport or any type of activity that I have gotten into since I was in high school, I have a tendency to find myself in these small groups that kind of build organically and that are made up of only women who support each other, call out things that should be called out. And it really, I don't know how it happens. I still haven't figured out the physics or anything behind it, but it helps when you have a small community that is kind of your backup for any type of situation. They don't need to come there with solutions, but you have a group of people whose opinions you value that you can fall back on.
Wow, that's really heartening to hear. I think I'm still trying to find my group of supporting women. Maybe I need to put myself out there and say, help me, or something. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's really encouraging to hear. Yeah, I'm still trying to find mentors and supportive groups. I think there should be more out there. I think women are feeling more empowered, especially on the internet, because you're voicing out, hearing other women voicing out their concerns and their, I don't know, pressure from work and stuff like that. I think it's really, really good. I'm going to go to the next question, I think. So it's quite similar to what you've already been talking about. What challenges you face in training other women? So how do you overcome these challenges, if there are any challenges at all?
I can go. Okay. I think the biggest challenge I face is when women first came to training, you can see the lack of confidence on their faces. For example, when I ask them how they feel about a hands-on session to try out the tools, I always get the same reaction. Yeah, I'd like to do it very much, but I'm not sure if I'm capable of using those tools because, I'm not tech savvy. I don't know anything about technology. I'm not familiar with this kind of stuff. And the interesting part is, it's my observation, this reaction is not limited to the women who are from the developing countries. Women from developed countries have the same reaction most of the time. But I mean, it makes sense, right? We all grew up hearing the same thing on and on. You are a woman, technology is not your strongest suit, you are not good on computers. After hearing that a lot of times, I think it becomes a hard-coded thing into our brains. As women, even we have the talent, we don't necessarily have the confidence to achieve this kind of tasks. So I think my main aim during this digital security trainings is to try to remove this prejudice and have women to gain their confidence. I try to encourage them to not afraid of tech, but embrace it. I think I had more than 20 digital security trainings with participants from different backgrounds. And every time the same thing happened. Right after they created their first PGP keys and sent their first encrypted email during the hands-on session, you can clearly see the difference on their face. It becomes the face of a confident woman. And after that point, they really start to feel relaxed, having fun, and become more eager to learn something new. Yeah, that's my challenge, I think.
For me, as I mentioned before, it's hard to get women to talk and present and share their projects at our meetups because they don't, it's either, it's usually like, oh, well, I have nothing to say, and that's not true. It's just that there's this level of perfectionism and the feeling that you need to know every aspect of it to talk about it. And there's also this thing of apologizing when you think you nailed 99%, but their leading 1% failed. So it's, and also apologizing to a chair when you hit it. It's those ingrained behaviors that just make it hard to get on the stage to get in front of people and talk. And what I tried recently to do is actually to make it more of a game, to make it more like an adventure where you should make mistakes or that you should make it personal. So I did a presentation at our meetup where I only analyzed data that came from my personal apps. So I devoted most of the time to GPS data that I had from a trekking trip in Georgia, but I also talked about how I can use data from my mobile applications, such as, I measure my productivity, you put down your periods, you have weather data, there's so much stuff that you can analyze. So I was joking about, I was pitching the women to do different projects, like check if there's, a relationship between your productivity and your period, or I don't know, just, find weird correlations in your own personal data. So that was kind of like getting people, encouraging the women to take it more as a game and not a professional setting where they have to be 100% right and perfect.
I totally understand what you mean by the perfectionists. I think one of the things that we should be more encouraging is that failing is okay. So if you fail, that's when you know you made mistakes and you can learn from it, right? So but you seem to have a correlation sort of theme going on with you for some reason. That's like a joke earlier on. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Do you want to, shall we say there's the last question. It's what worked and what didn't during this process of getting women in the platform capacity building? Can both of you share some examples or stories about that?
Okay, yeah, I'm unmuted. Well, as I mentioned, what worked is actually making it more informal, making it more like a fun, a fun thing that's not. In Serbia, it's a culture when it's very professional. Women close up more. So we're doing it in a space that's a hub, that's, a bit trashy in some aspects, and you can bring your own stuff, and it's not a formal setting. I bring my dog, usually. Skype should have named him Hangouts. Now he's no longer trending. But basically, like, you make it more, if you make the atmosphere more informal and more open, that kind of works in actually getting women to share their expertise because they do have it. And then when it comes to their capacity building, where they're more relaxed, it's easier to ask questions, it's easier to make mistakes. It's not like a very concrete answer, but that's what I have.
No, I think it's a great answer. I like the dog bit. You should definitely put the dog on the screen so we know who to thank for that.
He was in the presentation.
Yeah,
of course I got him in.
Ishik, would you like to share with us about your process?
Yeah, I think women still have doubts to enroll digital security trainings, especially in the global South countries. So I think, like Katarina said, we try to find ways to feel them more comfortable. We should promote the digital security trainings in a way that it makes them feel safer and not isolated, like more relaxed and fun environment, places. I don't know. I think we'll find a solution soon, hopefully.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's a shared theme about trying to make a context where women can feel confident and make a safe space to enable that learning from peers. So thank you both for offering these testimonies. And I think Sarah might be having some problems with connection because she dropped and then she tried getting back on. But we are at time right now, and I wanted to take just 1 or 2 minutes to thank you all for joining and for preparing such meaningful presentations to talk about your work and to engage so meaningfully as well in this conversation. I think it's important to talk about how we support each other and how we see each other going forward in Open Heroines. So yeah, thank you very much for joining this our first virtual event, and a special thank you to She and Nani, who are my partners in hosting this event and monitoring different channels to see if people have questions and comments. And so yeah, thank you both for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
See you on the open web.
Yes, I'll see you all online.
Yeah.